Okay. Oh, that's for the video. That's right. I don't follow directions very well. So as Brian said, we're Brian and Amanda Johnson, and we're locals. We actually are kind of an OG Surrey Garden family. So our oldest back there, and I think Amanda, you were praying on campus at the the Agritopia campus, probably 30 years ago, 28 years ago. So we love the GCS family. Just so you all know, our family and a lot of the experiences we've had in the community have been connecting with parents through our church and through the ministry we do with you guys. So we're just really honored to be here with you and to talk about this topic really in an area that is kind of in our own backyard. The areas that we deal with at a national level, we get to bring to home with you. So we're real excited to be here tonight. So we do want to just start out by kind of thinking about the fact that we are living, as Brian mentioned, in this age of technology where there's some tremendous advancements. You think of everything, the capabilities that we have. We can order groceries or diapers with our voice now, and some crazy Amazon system shows up at our door, and we don't even have to talk to a person. That's amazing tech, right? But it also comes with a lot of concerns and perils that the advancements and the rate and pace of technology that we've seen come with a ton of threats, a lot of concerns, and we need to be able to deal with those and address them properly as parents of kids in this digital age. Because with all this convenience, with all of the ease of life, there are also a lot of challenges that we need to be prepared for. So as we think of the kids that we're raising, they are growing up as digital natives in a world that we didn't. We didn't grow up with phones and with iPads and with always connected devices, but they are growing up in that, and it's their new normal. So we need to aim up into the way that God has designed us to be their parents. He's called us as their parents to lead them through this generation. So we do want to have a Q&A time toward the end for things that we haven't answered. If you'd like to scan that code, I'll give you just a second to do that. But that QR code will let you pull up a page. You can submit a question to us, and feel free to do that throughout the presentation, and we'd love to address it. If we don't get to the question by the end, we would love to capture your email so we can email you a response or a resource to also help you. We want to be able to equip you with tools and resources in any way we can.
So tonight our goal is to encourage and equip you as parents raising kids in this digital world. And because these years are so formative and so important, this is what we are building for years to come. So this is what we want to do, is to equip and get you ready for parenting at this age.
And Brian opened us up in prayer, so I appreciate that too. Well, we'll jump into this verse that I think is really paramount when we think about technology. I love applying scripture in a way that it was meant to be. And in this context, John 1:3, through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that's been made. Nothing, meaning technology, is not a surprise to God. His sovereignty extends beyond everything that we're seeing and growing through and innovating. So nothing has been made without him, without his understanding, without his will, and without his sovereignty over it. So he's not surprised by smartphones. He's not surprised by artificial intelligence. He's not surprised by any of the innovations that will happen. So we serve a big God, and he's given us confidence and hope in being able to manage technology in a way that honors him. His sovereign over that gives us this confidence that we can actually parent this generation. So don't lose hope in the battle and the struggles that you're in. A brief bit about us. So Brian and Amanda Johnson, as we said, we've been married 28 years. We have 4 kids, actually 3 young adults, amazing adults, and 1 teenager, amazing teenager, that we have the honor and privilege of being able to raise 2 sons and 2 daughters. But we're not here as experts. While we have experience and training and we've done a ton of study into this, we're parents who are wrestling through this and learning as we go too, because things change all the time. What we believe we've done and the goals that we like to bring forward in a presentation like this is share our experiences as parents through some of the failures that we've run through and stepped over, and to share with you the research and the learning and the training that we've had through our years of experience working through this and what God's taught us in our combined experiences. In our home, as disciple makers and parents that we are, we've often said that the ultimate goal in parenting the children in our home, is to help them to grow independent of us in an increasing dependence on God through their relationship in Jesus. We believe that's really important. And so as today, when we think of how that plays out, technology and understanding tech from a biblical viewpoint and a balanced view of tech is just super critical for us, is to apply that in a way that we can put a biblical lens on top of technology.
Yeah, so my background is in education and counseling, not technology. So for the past 25 years, I've invested my time and my heart into shepherding and homeschooling our kids from the early years through high school into adulthood. And through counseling and teaching and leading in marriage ministry at our church, I've had this opportunity just to watch how kids and adults have changed over time. Their attention span has changed, their learning styles have changed, even relationships have all been shaped by technology in ways that we just cannot ignore. So even in our own home, I felt this tension of the balancing between potential threats and harms of technology and the good and necessary role that technology plays.
And I have spent 30 years in technology in some really interesting roles. I was the former head of global cybersecurity at PayPal and emerging technology research. So I've studied everything from cryptocurrency to quantum computing to artificial intelligence, and all of the brainiacs in the world that I've been able to work with are humans that are still dealing with the same struggles that you and I are in the home. We're all dealing with the challenge of mixing our worldview with technology's influence. And so I've had this exposure over the years in cyber fraud and cyber security areas to think about the biblical lens of applying that in a way to help protect families. And I now have the privilege, I transitioned from corporate into a more purposeful role that's developing and aiming tech. And I've got the privilege of working with our oldest son, Caden, who's in the back of the room back there. You'll hear from him later about the tech, and in the field of cyber safety. So when I first went to college, and as many of you remember, there was no cybersecurity anything. The internet was built open and unsafe. Well, that's the same today. So now we're emerging a field of cyber safety to focus on protecting people online. And Caden's got a tremendous passion and some amazing gifting to apply to this that we've been just thrilled to see him play out. We've got the privilege of working with and recently launching a product, a service that Caden came up with called Guardian Lock. And it's a solution designed to make iPhones, iPads, and now even MacBooks, any Apple product, safe for kids and for adults. And we partner with Tim Tebow and organizations like his. The Tim Tebow Foundation is a really close partner of ours to help deliver these solutions to combat human trafficking and to protect children online. And that said, I've dealt with Secret Service, FBI, Interpol, all these crazy people in my career, but I can tell you this, the most intimidating conversations that I've ever had about cyber safety have been with my own kids.
Yes.
Can you guys relate to that? It is really difficult to talk about some of the challenges in your own home, especially when we're part of that and we're responsible for a lot of these things. So one of the companies that we partner with and we do a lot of research and study with is making a documentary to help bring awareness to some of the challenges that we're facing. So we want to show you this clip from it.
As the generation of people who have only ever experienced social media like this grow up, we're going to lose sight of what reality was before.
I've been doing this work for a long time. I'm seeing some grassroots awakenings.
This is something that is affecting every family.
Working age adults,
living
people in
so
their 30s,
much.
40s,
What?
50s.
They're not living too much.
Oh, okay.
What are schools supposed to do? We have to use it just to survive.
Okay, we wanted to pause it there because it's our friend Chris Kaspar there who said we have to use it just to survive. That statement alone should have such weight for us when we think like, wow, we have to use it to survive. And in many ways, that's unfortunately true. But at the same time, even though it's so deeply integrated into our lives, that is exactly why we have to think carefully about how to steward technology well with our children, because they'll never know life without it. So tonight we're going to face a few topics that we'll structure into 4 themes. One is define reality. We like to take a leadership principle of saying, let's just get the problem out there, talk about the reality that we all live within. Secondly, inspire hope. We don't want to get stuck in the problem. Let's talk about the hope that we can find in growing through it. Third is making changes. So anytime we have a challenge and opportunities to grow through that, we want to find specific areas where we can model change. And then lastly is to measure progress, to make sure we have continual movement toward making changes that this reality of problems that we're facing will go against. So I think the real challenge that we have, though, especially at the age that most of your kids are probably at, is that you usually think that, well, this is a challenge for the teenager stage, when they have social media, when they're on smartphones. And some of you have younger kids and you're thinking, I'm getting ready for that stage. But the truth is this, the foundation that you're building for them is being set right now. The patterns that you're modeling for them for how they'll steward technology are being set now. And much, much earlier across society, because today's kids are actually being introduced to technology as early as ages 2 to 4. That is the industry average adoption for technology in the United States today. And by age 10, industry experts say that many 10-year-olds are already spending multiple hours a day on devices and not in interpersonal relationships. So this generation, as we think of how the world looks at the generation that we're raising up here, this is called Gen Alpha. Just a brief talk about this. They're born between 2010 and 2024, and I call them the iPad generation because, not surprisingly, in 2010, what product was released to the market? The iPad. The iPad was introduced to the market in 2010, and that's just when this generation of alphas started coming in to the world. So they live in a world that is post-smartphone, post-AI. They're growing up in a world that has already had all of these technologies introduced. So they're not transitions for them as we think of them to be. They're not having to work through, oh, well, the world wasn't this way before. They're digitally native growing up into that because most of them are being influenced and media consumed into the generation that we've set them into.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that even simple things like sitting through a meal, having conversation as a family is becoming more difficult. And we've all seen that. We've been at restaurants or maybe even in our own home. A child gets restless and it's just so easy to hand them a screen just to get a few minutes of peace. But in that moment, something deeper is happening. We're trading connection for convenience. And we're missing this opportunity to teach patience, to teach self-control, and teach how to really be present. And our kids are always learning, whether we realize it or not. And they're learning what relationships look like and how to wait and how to listen and what matters most to us as parents. So let's consider for a moment, let's look at Deuteronomy 11:19. And it says, "You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when you're sitting in your house and when you're walking by the way and when you lie down and when you rise." And this is just such a reminder to us that our kids are being discipled every single day, either by us or by someone else or by something else. And as parents, we have a biblical obligation, and it's a privilege, but to train and to guide them in truth before they leave our home. God's entrusted us with that sacred responsibility. And so we're going to look at 3 stages. Stage 1 is ages 0 to 5, and so we're calling that kind of the protection time. And so did you know that by age 5, about 90% of brain development has already happened? During these years, the brain is incredibly adaptable. It's constantly forming connections based on what children experience. And so what gets used gets strengthened, and what's not used gets removed. And that means that the early years are shaping how kids think, how they relate, how they learn, and what they love. Here we see MRI studies show that excessive screen time of young children can actually reduce development in areas related to language, visual processing, empathy, attention, complex memory, and early reading skills, and even emotional regulation. This translates for them into real-world challenges. So children who spend 5 to 7 hours per day on a digital device, any digital device, are on average 2 school years behind their peers who are using screens 1 hour a day. So it really does show for them. Other research highlights how active engagement with adults matters. So all the time that you put in and other adults putting in with your kids really matters. 3 and 4-year-old children show more activation in the language regions of the brain when reading a book with a parent compared to reading a book or listening to an audiobook or reading a book on a screen. And iPads showed the lowest activation of all. So use of screens at early age has been shown to delay fine motor skills, grasping, cutting, handwriting, tennis shoes, and painting. So even, putting a screen in front and saying, hey, paint on the screen on an iPad is not the same as actually painting. So we see that. MRI scans of 8 to 12-year-olds found stronger reading circuits in those who spent more time in paper books. Paper books are not dead, right? Versus screens. Beyond cognitive effects, there are serious emotional risks. And this is a study from the UC San Francisco Children's Hospital. They found that the more time kids spend on screens between the ages of 9 to 11 are higher odds for suicidal behavior for them 2 years later at 11 to 13. And that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, so as Amanda said, we know then that what we repeat gets wired. So at this age, at this early stage one that we're talking about, face-to-face interaction is where kids are learning best, movement and play and in real relationships. Because simply put, there is no such thing as too little screen time. Almost like you don't have a recommended limit of how much they should minimally consume of sugar in a day. That's a fun thing. But screen time, even more impactfully, has no minimum amount that you should give them to consume. So our recommendations, and those by all of the experts in the field, would be that between 0 to 5 years old, that you delay tech. You withhold that from them. Make eye contact when they speak, when you have conversations with them. Make sure to set your screen down. Don't ever let your screen become an interruption between a conversation and a connection with your child. So delaying tech as long as possible, because ideally between 0 to 5 years, as Amanda described in development areas, has proven that no tech is the best tech for a 0 to 5-year-old. And being intentional and not reactive. So at this age, we're thinking about what they watch, and what they watch is us. And what they watch is the world. And at 0 to 5, we're patterning and setting an example for what is normal and what's important to us. And they'll catch that. They'll live that out as a value more than they'll do what we tell them to do. So the second stage, which is the practice stage, is between 6 and 12 years old. And many of your children are in that stage as well. And that's where a lot of kids are just learning best by doing, by being active. Friends matter a lot to them at this stage. They start building connections and building relationships. And they'll compare themselves to others. So comparison is something they're going to start to model. And what are they wearing? What are they playing with? What are they doing? These are things that you'll see that children are becoming then eventually more independent in this stage from you to try to do things on my own. You'll hear a lot of those phrases, right? That means you can assign chores to them, keep them busy. When they become 10 to 12, you'll start to see that they're thinking bigger and deeper ways. They'll start to have self-conscious things and worrisome about things that are happening in their lives, and they process differently. And friends and fitting in becomes more important to them at this stage as well. They care about freedom and they care about fair play. And these are values that at that development stage we need to cement in relationships, not in what screens offer and not what in media it provides for them. So here at this stage, we are teaching a lot in this age between 6 and 12. It's a lot about responsibility and boundaries and how to use technology wisely, mostly keeping that exposure very limited and doing it by example. So almost all use of technology at this stage is actually family time. It should be shared time that you're using a device within the context of a family activity. So it's not enough just to give our kids safe tech. Even at this stage, it's a difficult thing to monitor because their curiosity and their development and their exploration of identity is really deepening. So if we blindly handle and hand to our child at this age an unrestricted and unsupervised device, we may as well be giving them a loaded gun. And I don't mean that pejoratively or just to be exaggerating. It is truly a danger, a definite danger that they will fall into, and they're not prepared for it. And most likely, we're not prepared for it either. Those discussions about exposure and comparison issues and everything that they're going to deal with at that age are really difficult for a child to handle because they're just not emotionally mature and relationally grounded enough to handle that. Whether that be accidental exposure, whether it be predators, worldly influences, and the media that will undermine your role and your position and the training you've provided as their parent. So you might be wondering, maybe I'm being too conservative about this. You guys are looking at the age and you're thinking, wow, really? Johnson, you're saying we shouldn't have our kids using devices at this age? Well, let me show you something. Tell me what you think now.
Leaders strictly limit the technology used for their own children.
The Apple founder actually would not let his own kids play with computers.
Industry giants like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, who restricted their own kids' access to technology at home.
Wow.
Okay, so that was one of many, many news clips, but the time that I spent in Silicon Valley, and that was a lot of years, I can tell you there was this interview with Steve Jobs when they announced the iPad in 2010, where a reporter asked him, "Hey, Steve, how are your kids liking the new iPad?" And this is a quote. He said, "We don't allow the iPad in our home. We limit how much technology our kids use. We think it's too dangerous for them, in effect." This guy released the iPad to the world and then said, "But not for my kids." So in a lot of ways, we have to consider if the people making the technology, and this is not just Steve Jobs, by the way, I can tell you countless of personal examples of technology executives that I worked with at Meta, at Google, at all these companies, Snapchat, the executives are not giving their kids tech until they're older because they know the harms and the damage that it can do. It's something for us to heed. So our recommendations at this age, between 6 and 12, is to limit tech to an hour a day of screen time, supervised only.
Right, and no social media at this age, and devices are shared, not owned. And by that, I mean defining tech in your home is important for your kids. So defining tech to your kids, this is the family iPad, or this is our school computer. And that really takes away the entitlement issues. This is mine, this is mine to put whatever on. So I would say defining that for your children is really important. Encourage shared use of devices in open, visible areas. We know that transparency builds accountability, and that goes for us as parents too, using those screens in open places. Use family charging stations. Devices are checked in and out that way. So you check them out, you ask mom and dad if you want them, and you check them in and out. So what can we do instead? Right? This is what kids are probably thinking. So then what if I can't be on a screen? Encourage reading books. We just read that those paper books are really valuable. Create opportunities for hands-on learning. Play games together as a family, right? Games that are not on the computer. Games that some kids are, that's boring, right? We have to get back to playing games. Use everyday routines like meals and car rides and taking a walk for conversations as a family. If you're using a device, use it for family fun. Use it for maybe like trivia, do with your kids. Instructional videos you can do, or a lot of times my kids when they were younger liked to make instructional videos, and so we would make those and play them back and see if they actually worked. Also, you can have the kids take part in making a family music list, a playlist, have some family dance parties at home, right? These are moments where real connection and discipleship can happen.
And I'll tell you, I'm exhibit A that you don't have to be a good dancer to have a good family dance party. But this is a stage now, stage 3, where preparation time really comes into play. 13 and up. And this is a stage when you're thinking that transition of preparing them from middle school to high school and preparing them for the exposure of friendships. But everything that you've built into starts to get tested at this stage of development. So the goal is no longer just control or just training them. It's now preparation for individual decision making, and you're building into them personal responsibility because now they are facing greater access, stronger influence, and a lot more pressure. So when we talk about what happens even in the school setting with the pressure that's on parents and on the students to make technology part of the learning process and how they integrate tech, there are a lot of challenges in addition to academic integrity with AI that a lot of people are dealing with distraction of tech to just keep focus and complete an assignment, to even the proper safeguarding and protections of getting technology securely developed in schools. And GCS has done an amazing job. I think as a society, though, we're really struggling to catch up in a lot of these areas as parents and as educators to do this well. So I want to ask you this. I remember this time, and maybe you remember this too, the pivotal time in your life. I love stepping on foot on a middle school campus. Some are junior high, some are middle school, but in my age, I actually went to MacDonald Middle School in Mesquite, Texas, and I remember that middle school vividly. Now I want you to think back for a moment with me. Think back to a typical morning, if you can remember this, in 7th grade. Imagine your 7th grade year. And most of us, it was really awkward, right? We're trying to figure out how our body's supposed to move and can we actually not trip over our feet and how's my hair supposed to fall and all of those things that as a 7th grader, you're trying to figure out. It's dramatic, it's super exciting. If your experience was like mine, it was really weird and impressionable too because you just don't know how to process things well. But let's say one of those mornings you're having breakfast, you're sitting at the table and your mom's great. She says, hey, I got your backpack ready to go. You finished breakfast and I just want to get you loaded up. And your backpack has your math book. It's got your notebook. It's got your pen and pencil. I say Trapper Keeper. You say 3-ring binder. But you kind of say, what are the things that you would normally get into a backpack at that age and stage, right? But this time, for some reason this day, your mom decided to do something a little different. She said, I really want you to be prepared because your friends have all these other things. So I'm going to give you some extra things today. Now, your mom's great. She's loving. She's strict too, but she's a great mom. And she really wants to make sure that you are adequately prepared for the day. So she takes your backpack. And because you have all these necessary items, she adds to them a DVD player and some movies and a CD collection, maybe like all of them, and some magazines and Nintendo games, a gaming system. Wouldn't that be fun to have? Your Pokemon cards, remember those? Football cards, basketball cards. She's loading you up with everything that you might possibly need and that your friends probably have. Set of porn magazines, because a lot of your friends have those for some reason. Pictures of all your friends, a camera, a small TV. You get the idea here. Like she's loading you up with everything that your friends have as well. She slides the zipper up and goes to hand it to you and she says, hey, listen, don't touch anything that I just gave you in that backpack. Except for the math book and the Trapper Keeper and the pencil and the pen. That's it. Because here's the thing, your friends may have all those things. It may be okay for them to use the Nintendo while they're in class. It may be all right for them to take pictures and send them to other people with their camera, but not for you. You're not allowed to touch those things. In fact, not during the day at school, not on the ride during the bus to school or from school. I don't want you to touch any of those things. And if you do, you're grounded. Can you imagine that? What would the weight of that feel like? Here's the thing though, if your mom says, all right, honey, have a good day and sends them out, this is what it feels like when we give a kid an unprotected device. The access that they've been given and the comparison and the challenge of doing that in an unprotected way is tremendous. And I look at that and I think like out of the box, a smartphone gives them all of that, all of the available access to things by default. That's the way they're set up nowadays. So we would expect our kids in this case, as we've done this too, to stand up against the world's most brilliant product marketers and engineers that have developed attention-getting marketing strategies, ad campaigns, and we think that they're going to exert a level of self-control that I guarantee you I didn't have at that age. I don't know about you. But then we tend to go, well, now how could you fail? How could you have a problem with this? I think we really need to take a step back and imagine that it's probably not their fault. As parents, it's our responsibility to make sure they're actually equipped well, that we've had conversations, we've trained the heart, and we're ready to do that. But this is why we would say in these earlier stages of development, delay is the way. You can't wait to the point of saying, well, we delayed too long to give our kids social media. We waited too long to give them a smartphone. We really need to delay open access. We need to delay social media as long as necessary and focus on building responsibility and personal convictions.
Yeah, that's where that heart comes in, that heart training. So in this stage, teens can think deeply, complex, and have different perspectives. They start forming even their own identity, their values and beliefs about who they are, about what's right and wrong. They have emotions and a lot of peer pressure that affects their daily decisions. And they may take more risks because self-control is still developing. Friendships become deeper based on interests and values, and they're learning to handle stress and challenges, often from watching their parents and how we deal with stress. So they deal with more threats, I think, than sometimes we're even aware of. We were talking about just today, I remember when our boys were about 12 and 16, and Brian was working for PayPal, and he came home and he shared a story with me of a case that he was working on with the FBI. And there was a 15-year-old boy who had gotten a text from what seemed to be a teenage girl that showed interest in him. So, you know, of course, he responded through social media. They texted back and forth, And pretty soon it got a little more personal. And finally, the girl had sent him a nude, or girl, I'll say, sent him a nude photo and asked for one back. And he shared one and was immediately contacted by extortionists that demanded payment from him. So demanding payment, they threatened him to share, they said, well, share it with the picture with your friends and your family and all of your classmates. And the boy didn't know what to do. He begged them, said, I don't have the money, I can't do this, and he ended up committing suicide. And this is, it's heavy, it's very heavy. And this is the situation that they were dealing with the FBI, and on what got to the point of this boy finally taking his own life. And so that's a heavy thing to go through. Brian came home and shared that with me, and he said, Amanda, I really feel like we need to talk to our boys about this and share this story. And I was just super hesitant to share the story because I felt like we're going to be introducing a concept and a thought that they haven't even dealt with yet. Our kids had very little access to social media or even technology in general. And so I was a little bit worried about sharing that story, but Brian was pretty insistent. He felt like it was important to share that story. And I am so glad that he did talk to the boys about that. My son was 16, had just gotten a phone, and 2 days after Brian talked to the boys about that, he came over to Brian and he said, Dad, is this the kind of text you're talking about? Because he had received the exact same kind of text that boy had gotten. And I can't even imagine if we hadn't shared that story, what his response or the heaviness of that would have been for him.
And so that story, while it's so fresh even in my mind, has unfortunately been repeated over and over and over again. And I was involved in many of those investigations where what we would find out is that innocently a child gets a text and thinks, oh, this is a friend, or a snap and says, oh, that looks like somebody's name that I know. And they entertain the discussion. They get involved in a conversation and they build trust with someone that they don't know. And oftentimes on the other end of that is not a girl or not a boy. It's a person in a call center that's scamming, that's looking for sextortion scammed victims, and they victimize them all the time. Every 16 seconds in America, there's another sextortion victim who's either paying or hurting themselves as a result of that.
Because they're just so ashamed.
So as that's one of the threats, I will talk for a moment about threats. And sextortion scams have been on the rise for the last 5 years. And I did work with the FBI and Secret Service on several cases that we worked on. But those things, as they unfold, are really challenging to unravel because the emotions that come into play are usually shame and guilt and frustration about how did I end up in this situation, and fear about what if they share the photo? How did that end up happening? And I was speaking with a man that deals with marriage ministry work, and he was just telling me out of the blue that his son, when he was 17 years old, nearly committed suicide from the exact same scenario. And he didn't know who to call. He didn't know who to talk to. He felt too ashamed to go tell his parents that that had happened. So this is something you need to be aware of. It is unfortunately way too common. And I hate that we have to talk about really difficult topics, but they are so true and relevant in your kids' age. You need to tell them there are threats. There are people that are trying to take advantage of them. And they sometimes come in like this. In fact, I just got this one today. Hey, Brian, would you be up for a hike when I come there? It's so great to have some company. Have anyone ever received those? They're becoming more and more common, especially with AI-powered tools. And you can receive these texts and think, oh, maybe this is someone I don't remember. That phone number looks kind of familiar. On the right side was one that said, I got your number, guess who I am? Huh. The response that I typed in, I wanted to leave so that you could see, I don't have you in my contacts. If you have a business context and you don't know who this is, that's a first response. The best response is swipe, delete, report as spam. Every single time, guys. Teach your kids to do that if they've got a smartphone. Swipe, delete, report as spam. Do not go the next level with these. These are professionals. Don't mess around with them. Don't play with fire and say, oh, I'm gonna get you, or encourage your kids to do that. It is a really, really damaging chain of events if you go down that route. So among those threats with sextortion, romance scams, if you've heard of those, have been extremely common. And we've dealt with some elderly folks that have been victims of romance scams. Cyberbullying that you're all probably familiar with in the form of rage baiting nowadays has become super popular with teenagers. Cyber predators, and these numbers are a bit dated now, cyber predators have actually reached more than half of the kids that have been surveyed in most of these. And then sexting has become extremely common as well, of course. Gaming and VR have been groomers' paradises. The area of groomers finding, targeting, and grooming kids into a relationship through gaming environments and through even VR environments. I was involved in a case not too long ago. I was an expert witness helping advise on how a VR system could be used to coerce a child into a trafficked situation. And it's a horrible situation, but you need to be aware that these threats are real and they're prevalent. And then AI's impact on human relationships, and then the development of AI into the pornography exposure. The average age of first exposure to pornography is still around 11 years old. And people, some experts would say it's 10, it's 12. Okay, I'm sticking with 11 just because it's a good medium point, but that is the average exposure of a child in America today. And then by the age of 18, over 90% of boys and 60% of girls have reported being exposed to pornography. I asked our 20-year-old son, hey, what do you think the number is? And he goes, 100 and 100. You can't not anymore.
Reported.
Yeah, reported. So how many of them have actually been exposed to pornography in some form? And he said the challenge is that kids who don't want to be exposed to this are having a difficult time not being exposed in today's technology. So sexting, this is something that the world has a view of. And there were a lot of studies on this that said, hey, it's a healthy outlet. It's okay for your kid to sext. It's an extra. No, it's not. My gosh, this is a horrible thing. So if you see the habit of kids sexting, you need to address it with some severity that says, this is not only a federal crime and an offense, but you're exploiting someone else. It is not okay. And to train the heart in these matters in a way that says this is not a healthy outlet and it's not a natural development. It's actually offensive to them and to their creator.
And I think it's important too for kids to realize their pictures that they put out there are never gone. They don't disappear just because they delete them. A lot of kids think if I just delete it, no one will have it. And we know that's not true.
And that's also a public service announcement to parents that post about their kids. Keep in mind, you're creating a digital identity for your children that won't go away. Your children's digital identity is being created if you're posting pictures about them and where they're going and what they're doing and identifying them in a way that they may actually not appreciate when they're an 18-year-old. They may say, hey, why do I have this digital identity? You've posted all these pictures about me. I don't want a stranger coming up and saying, hey, Bobby, nice game on the soccer field last week. What? Like, let's be careful and cautious about to whom and how we post in social media. This is a key topic that we can't neglect, and that is that the persistent use of social media has been ruining the mental health of kids and teens, especially those struggling, and the way that it's influenced them in depression and anxiety now more than ever before. In fact, the last 30 days, we've had 2 landmark cases. These have been remarkable lawsuits against Meta and Google. Never have we ever seen a payment and a settlement of this size happen as a result of proof, evidence, and enough victims proving that their platforms have been used to cause addictive behaviors. And they're causing these results that now the court systems are starting to give into and award. So weak and absent child protections and safety controls, addictive product designs are what have been attributed to as causing and exaggerating a mental health crisis with anxiety and depression causing millions of users. So these thousands of pending cases that have been in court systems for years and years are now seeing a potential light. So I completely envision in the next 5 years, we'll see literally thousands to tens of thousands of lawsuits against tech companies because of the lack of safety controls and measures, both for depression, anxiety, and safety issues that are causing exposure and exploitation of what Tim Tebow calls the most vulnerable people in our world, and that's our kids. So it's now been factually supported, and it's not a coincidence that in the last 10 years, antidepressant prescriptions have increased over 200% in direct correlation with use of social media. And adolescents that use social media for over 3 hours a day have been shown to be double the risk of experiencing depression and anxiety as those who don't. So the pressure of comparison, the identity crisis, that it counters a biblical worldview that we're fighting against. that is challenging them in their value and identity that should be rooted in Christ when they get too much exposure and fed by social media. This is really a group that we work with called NCOSE. It's a National Center on Sex Exploitation. And each year they publish what they call the Dirty Dozen list. It just came out last year. And the Dirty Dozen list highlights areas where tech companies are failing to protect and to build preventative controls to protect kids online. And the mainstream exposures of these things have significant consequences. They do a lot of research. They talk with the tech companies. I've been on some of these calls where we'll call them and outline, here are the controls you're missing, the issues that you've not addressed, and then ask them, please fix them. Give them guidance on ways to help it to be safe and protective for parents' sake. And that exposure that's come out through this has been tremendous because it's actually resulted in a lot of good. There have been tech companies make significant changes. I was actually part of that when I was at PayPal. I was talking with the NCOSE team about how PayPal had been processing payments for Pornhub. And I sat down with our chief risk officer and our CEO and I said, why are we doing this? Why don't we shut it off? And our CEO goes, yeah, it's a violation of our user agreement. So we shut off payments for Pornhub. And I thought, now how many other companies are not doing that just because the good people and the willing people to make changes don't know that these issues even exist, or it hasn't been raised to the level for them to take accountability. And that is a possible thing that you can be part of, is joining groups like NCOSE. So this is their Dirty Dozen list, and you can pull down the details offline, but NCOSE is a phenomenal organization fighting that. So as we think through tech addiction, it is emerging as the most common form of addiction. There is actually a psych profile for tech addiction now. But an interesting quote that I found a few years ago, we actually compete with sleep, this company CEO said, and we're winning. Anyone want to guess what company that is? Anybody? What's that? Netflix. Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, said that in an interview. It was actually after a shareholder meeting about how well they were doing. Their competition is sleep, and they're winning. The addictive nature of these technologies is tremendous because we know that we're clearly in a battle, especially with our kids, for their attention, their habits, their development, their relationships, but ultimately for their hearts, right? That's really what we're trying to win here. So when we think of this age and stage of protections, we need to pre-select and filter the content that they're consuming. We need to talk openly and often about what they see online, how they process it, what are they watching, who do they follow on YouTube, what kind of Instagram reels are they seeing. Have frequent conversations with them about that, and then ask them questions about how they process that. Because the goals that we have at this age and stage is not just restrictions, it's about training and stewardship. It's about having intentionality with our time. And the time that we have to be intentional with, we want to show another clip about. It's really an interesting perspective here, so we'll show you this here.
2017, UT Austin ran a really interesting study on the impact of where your phone is located and how that impacts cognitive performance. They had folks come into the lab, random phone, never had a SIM card in it, it's just a problem. Power that smartphone down. Take a battery of different cognitive assessments, a number of different conditions. Phones outside, in the waiting room, turn off. Phones in the room with them, still off, and put them in their bag. And then they had them take their phone out, still off, put it on the desk, just off to the side. They can see it, but it's just there, off, like a pro. As the phone went from being outside of the room to being in a pocket or a bag, being on the desk, scores linearly decrease, working memory, how intelligent you are. All these different cognitive assessments consistently, linearly plummet. The mere presence of the smartphone, even if it's turned over, even if it's off, reduce your performance. I'm not paying attention to it, it's not doing anything. This is not just a phone.
The average 13 to 18-year-old in the United States, they're spending 8 hours and 39 minutes per day looking at screens non-productively. I have personally seen iPhone screen time reports from college students spending 16 hours a day on their phone in the middle of the semester. So I decided to look at how much time does an 18-year-old actually have left. So we'll be optimistic here. For an 18-year-old, if they're going to live to 90 years old, they've got 864 remaining months. About 1/3 of those will be spent asleep. About 126 of those months actively working. About 18 of those months driving, 36 cooking and eating, 36 doing chores and errands, about 27 in the bathroom. So that leaves roughly 334 months, optimistically, for everything else in life. What deserves the largest chunk of that remaining free time? All the boxes that you want to tick on your bucket list, the people that you love and want to spend time with, all of that has to come out of those 334 months. But if we take the average amount of time that a 13 to 18-year-old in the United States is currently spending looking at screens non-productively, they're on pace to spend about 93% of their remaining free time looking at a screen non-productively. I have never shown a kid this graphic and had them say that TikTok is the thing that deserves the largest chunk of their remaining free time.
All of the
Wow. I showed that to my daughter, and she said, 27 months in the bathroom? We gotta get in and out of there. It's too much.
So this chart that Dino put together and the studies behind it are tremendous. And you're right, there probably needs to be less bathroom time and more chore time. But it really is an interesting study into the use of time. And when you verify some of the stats, he's spot on. This is not exaggerated data.
Yeah, so the question then becomes, what are we doing with our time that we've been given? And how are we investing in our kids? And that was a lot to take in. So I just want to give you another maybe way of thinking about it, about our time as parents. This has been an effective visual for me with my kids. And so here comes the teacher side of me, I guess, coming out. I'm going to show you a visual. This is 936, I did count them, 936 pennies are in here. And this is approximately the time that we have in weeks. So 936 weeks we have with our kids from birth to age 18. So we put 936 pennies in the jar. And the idea is, if we do this when our kids are born, we remove 1 penny a week from that jar. I just want to show you, this is what it looks like if you have a 15-year-old. Yeah, it's kind of hurt my heart a little bit because my daughter just turned 16. This is the removing of a penny every week. This is what we have left by the time our kids are 15. So that's kind of a visual. That's been really helpful to me. It hasn't been meant to create guilt. It's meant to create clarity for me. Seeing the weeks visually helps me to prioritize what really matters right now. So we know that our time is limited. It's incredibly valuable. And God entrusts children to us for this season. So we can guide them, we can point them toward Him, and invest in their hearts. Let's look at Psalm 90:12. It says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." So that's kind of where that idea came from. And Ephesians 5:15-16 says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." So what can we do as parents, right? Just kind of summarizing what we've talked about, delaying is a gift. Delay access as long as possible, especially in those early years. Your example is everything. Your child's watching you more than he is listening to you. Fill their world with better things. So don't just remove screens, replace them. Make some memories together. Move through these stages. Protect, practice and train, and prepare.
And here are some family rhythms, things that we implemented that we really found success with, and we've heard other parents say the same thing, and that is things like ensuring that you mandate device-free meals. There have been some funny videos about this that Will and some others have done, but I would just say, like, whatever works for you, if it's put the phones in a bag or a basket or on the counter, make sure that you have meal times at least once or twice a week together that are device-free. No screens during connection moments. That means when you've got a conversation happening, you set the phone aside, scoot it aside, throw it in a bag, get rid of it and show that the connection is more important. Shared devices before personal ones. Get in the habit of showing that lack of entitlement around devices means that shared devices are a good thing. We use those for different things. It might be a media purpose or an educational purpose. Set some clear boundaries and have constant conversations. We're not just starting a conversation here to end it. We're starting it to continue it. And you don't have to be perfect as a parent. We certainly are not all, but just being intentional is what it's about.
Yeah, because God chose you to raise these kids. God knows you as their parent, and He knows your child's heart. So we just have to be intentional because these years really matter.
So we want to shift a bit now into inspiring hope. That's a bit heavy. There's a lot to it for sure, a lot to process and to think through, challenging how our digital habits are mirrored with our kids, thinking about how we steward technology as an example of stewardship to our kids as well. But inspiring hope in Christ starts with the first thing, that there's nothing new to see here really. Again, God's not surprised by this. He's sovereign over it. There have been no new sins invented here either. The same repeat patterns are only expanded through what tech offers. And we're not helpless. There's support. We're not alone with the community. Look around you. Guys, there are other people in this community that want to be part of helping to parent well and come alongside and support. And you've got resources, and God is still on His throne. There's a yes and amen to each of those points, that we don't live like people who are without hope. Do we rely on the laws? No. In fact, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to speak at the Senate Finance and Commerce Committee about a law that we were trying to implement to make phones safe in Arizona. And we actually had a lot of bipartisan support for this bill. I went with Peter Gentala and with Chris McKenna, and we were speaking with the legislators about, hey, in Arizona, let's make it a safe state so that devices issued to kids, minors, would be safe by default. And we got some support, but then our governor vetoed it. And there were political powers that decided this was not a good bill for certain reasons. And the tech companies basically lobbied it out of the way. So we said, okay, laws aren't the way to do it.
How many steps does it take to make a phone safe?
So there were over 64 steps that we had documented, and Chris McKenna put into a document that if you as a parent want to make an iPhone safe for your kid, you have to follow over 64 steps. Anybody have a PhD in computer science? Like, it is ridiculous how difficult it is. So the reason why we pushed this bill forward was to try to get it to be automatic. Let's make it on by default. Why not? It's a kid after all. Let's at least protect from explicit material was the context of this bill. And that was the challenge with it.
Yeah, and I loved the example that you used when you were there. He was talking about when we get into a car, airbags are ready to go. We don't have to do any steps to make sure we're safe in the car. Those airbags are ready. We don't even have to think about them. But on our phones, especially for minors, there's so many steps to go through to make sure that they're safe. And he used that example, and what happened?
Yeah, so we actually built a Seatbelts for Tech guide that Nikosi published, and that walks through some steps that as a parent and we were advising tech companies to use. And that is now, we look at the strategy that we implemented in cybersecurity and we say, hey, cyber safety, let's take a page out of the book from the strategy here. We know how to build defense in depth, which means put it on the device, put it on the website, put it in controls that you as a parent will have available to you. We did get a law passed this year, it just went into effect, which restricts children's access to explicit websites that requires age verification. Now, the way it was implemented wasn't great, but it's at least a control. So we're making momentum and taking steps to get some things in place. But we would say, just as we learned through decades of cybersecurity practice, the first line of defense is the relationship. And the last line of defense is trust. It doesn't matter if you're securing financial networks or your kids' internet access. These are principles that we can apply in this page too. So our work, and Caden, if you'd come up, I want to transition a bit into the what does Protect Young Hearts do, and how are we then transitioning that into Guardian Lock? And then we'd love to hear some of your questions if you've submitted those, if you have any others you'd like to put into the form. If you have those up too, do you have them on your phone? Okay, so I'll pull them up then from here. So we'd love to go through and answer some questions and talk a bit about how Caden got into this field and what we do with Tim and the team and what Guardian Lock is about.
Yeah, hi, so I'm Caden, I'm 25. I was homeschooled by this one here. Went to college, did MIT for cybersecurity. Never wanted to be in cybersecurity or anything technical related, thanks to this guy here. But I found myself at an early age, probably about 12, that I had exposed myself online just by scrolling eBay. There's used to be at least some like back pages that you could get to, and I stumbled upon pornography, and from 12 on struggled with that as a just like a late night self activity. Didn't tell anybody, felt trapped, and slowly throughout my teenage years, getting to know other students and friends around me, that this problem was happening with everybody. And it wasn't just me, and I wasn't alone. But that's a big problem with people my age, is that you feel like you're alone. And so after we met Tim Tebow and I had a chance to kind of get up with my technical skills, I decided there's an end to this solution. There's a solution to this and an end to it, and it's through an iPhone, not an Android, not something that's removable through an app, but an actual solution that's locked onto an iPhone by default, and you can order it directly to you, no porn incompatible phone, and additional safeties also. So that's just kind of my story, how it came to be.
Yeah, so what we did was we partnered with Apple and with Verizon, and we do a bundled service so that we actually do build it by default. It's not breakable, so the kid can't remove an app or change a setting. And we did it because we tried to get the tech companies and the legislators to do this by default. They refused to. So then Caden and I were sitting in a meeting with Tim and some guys, and we're saying we need to prevent the exposure and exploitation of kids online. And Caden's going, hey, we have some companies doing this on Android. We're friends with Bark and with Covenant Eyes. We've got great relationships with them. Nobody is solving this for iPhones for kids. And I'm like, okay, be obvious. Like, what in the world? That's true. We haven't done anything in the industry. And Caden goes, well, can we do it? And so we started getting some great minds together. One of our partners just in the industry is actually the inventor of the iPad. He's a Christian now. He came to the Lord a couple of years ago, and I met him through this effort. And he said, when we walked through this model with him, we were in a meeting in Dallas, and we said, hey, Josh, what do you think of this idea of partnering to build a secure iPad, iPhone solution? And he goes, oh my gosh, this is remarkable. You guys need to do this. How can I help? So Caden's really had this passion to say, let's reach kids where they are to at least prevent the exposure and exploitation at an early age. And that's what we've done with Guardian Lock. So how can people use it? What's the kind of process? And then you've got some stuff in the back. You want to share with them about that?
Yeah, so it's an actual patented solution. We ran it here and got it patented and trademarked, so it's a real solution, not some back-end kind of way to do things. We don't touch the phones. They ship directly from the carrier or from Apple, or I have your door pre-configured, activated with a cell plan. We have a 1 monthly fee, and that goes directly for the phone, plus the cell plan, our protections on top, and we're building a really cool educational app with curated AI, curated content, and certain things to help enhance the safety, bring communities together, and kind of just put everything, packaged up in a nice little bundle. So we've got some test phones in the back if you guys want to check them out. We've got, I think the QRs up there are directly to the product. We've got like a GCS special. Is it even GCS anymore? That was a long time ago. I was originally from Surrey Garden, so that was a very, it's been a long time.
So, and we did get a few questions that I saw. Someone asked, what can a single parent do when the other parents allow unrestricted iPad accesses in their home? This was something, it's a tough one. It's something I talked with one of our pastors about because his kid got first exposed at the neighbor's house. You guys ever had that happen where you're kind of like, wait, what were you watching over there? We don't allow that. And there's a practice here, and we talk about this on the Protect Young Hearts website as well. And the practice is if your kid's spending regular time with another couple, to just sit down with them. And we have a tech agreement you can review with them and say, hey, we have a couple things we'd like to just make sure that we're consistent on. And I'm sure you guys have thought about this, and if you haven't, we'd love to encourage you to build some practices. And that might be that, and these are the 3 B's, by the way, that you do not allow devices in bathrooms while they're bored or in bedrooms. Those are the 3 B's of risk that we would say you always prevent usage of devices in bathrooms during bedroom and during boredom. And those things would be a beginning point to a conversation. And you talk with your neighbors about, hey, if our kids are playing and hanging out together, do you allow them to use a device that's unrestricted? And at what age and stage do you allow access to social media? And those would be discussions I would start with, and then have the regular discussions with your kids about, do they get to use devices at their friend's house or at their family's house? Other things you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough situation when you're dealing with multiple homes and parents and the relationship there. I think your best bet with that is to be having conversations with your child. If you and the other parent are not doing co-parenting very much, or maybe the relationship is a little bit tense, I would say you're really, really going to have to lean into having some probably hard conversations and helping your child to build some convictions in their own heart.
Anything else to add?
No.
Okay. Another question was, what does competitive and mind-challenging games correlate to cognitive skills? So how do competitive and mind-challenging games correlate to cognitive skills? And I think this has been a funny one. You've talked about this a bit too, but we've talked about how games and thinking and constructive skills do have a role in the education process. We're not anti-tech here. I hope you don't hear that. We are constructive tech in a supervised way at the right ages and stages, and using stair steps to introduce technology at different levels. So there is absolutely cognitive benefits in the use of some games and challenge and competitive models that technology is encouraging. In fact, we've invested in some of them, some phenomenal tools that are helping to enhance performance and cognitive abilities, but do it with understanding that, for one, you might get ads served in that app that you don't approve of. In fact, we've seen in Block Blast, there was a report recently. Anybody use Block Blast? Really fun game. It's like Tetris. So it's a modern version of Tetris that a lot of kids are starting to play, and even young adults are playing. And it's a really fun game, and it's 4 and up in the App Store. One of the reasons why Apple is on the Dirty Dozen list is that their App Store is not enforcing age restrictions. So if you're using screen time controls and you have age restrictions and you go, well, it's okay, my kid doesn't have access to these explicit games or apps because I've got them age restricted, right? Unfortunately, Apple is not adhering to that. So what we put them on the Dirty Dozen list for is because games like Block Blast will allow explicit and suggestive ads within that app. So while your kid's playing a game, a cognitive game, it's increasingly common that they're going to get an ad served up that will say, hey, use this AI filter, this AI build your picture into a video, and that will turn into notification apps, exploitive apps, and those things are being served up at an increasing rate now. So if you use cognitive games, make sure you use them first, you test them out, you verify that, and then as you said, like in the younger stage, do them together. Don't just hand it to your kid and say, this is a 4 and up game, it should be fine. The ads and the recommendations in them are not. Anything to add to that?
No, I just, as I've progressed in the tech field and just maturity wise growing up, and through social media being kind of the guinea pig generation, the way that Instagram and TikTok and all of these social media apps target the attention, but not just the attention, the actual content that they're pushing in order to slowly start bringing in specific topics that they know that you'll watch more of. And if you just go on a plain TikTok, create a Gmail, put it at a younger age, 15-year-old boy, and just watch the kind of content that starts to come up and the kind of things that you start getting exposed to, because they know that's the kind of thing a 15-year-old boy would watch. And as you start watching a little bit more segments of each of them, that's your whole feed. And they're specifically targeting those kinds of kids and those people. And it's just something you don't go on Instagram and think, this is just a terrible decision for my child. It's a Pornhub. It's not. But as you're progressing through it as a child, growing up in it and watching as that content kind of curates for you, it's a terribly dangerous place for anybody.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So another question is, what are the safe websites and gaming sites for kids? What tech is out there to protect kids online? So, and we can walk through Guardian Lock, of course. And Guardian Lock is a solution that, as a safe phone as a service, will protect from inappropriate and explicit content online. We restrict what apps are allowed. But more than that, we actually say protection starts with you, because we give parents the controls. We give you simple ways to do things like put the phone in phone-only mode. You guys ever heard of that? Has anyone ever said, like, I wish I could just make this thing a flip phone? Well, we made that. We actually made a button on the Manager app for the parent where you can just say, I want the thing to be in phone-only mode, or phone and text mode, and just with supported contacts. We took all the things we wished we could do, and we built them into the thing to try to make it work effectively for parents as well. So we built those into that. I think the other piece, let me jump into, where is it? What's that?
Is it explained?
Yeah, so I think as it relates to the mechanism, like how do we do it? We use the managed service in the phone basically at a profile. So when Apple lets us configure it from the beginning, so we can manage that remotely through your app. And I think I have an app interface and we can walk you through it back there too. But what we do is then give you a learning portal. And the learning portal is free for anyone too. That's also available on protectyounghearts.com. And that'll give you free websites. If you say, well, what's a good gaming site? What's an app that we can follow or media we can consume? We actually have a couple of resources. Let me share this one with you that are great websites for you to encourage your kids to use. Go ahead. And let's go down. Oh, I think I put those in the appendix. I'll send them out. How about that? And you can get access to them. So we've got so many resources that I think would help with those kind of questions about what are the good websites to go to. Someone asked, is Verizon the only company supporting Guardian Lock? No, we actually aren't exclusive to Verizon, but not ironically, so the CEO of PayPal that I worked for back then is now the CEO of Verizon. And we went to him and we said, we want to build a safe phone for kids that we can make a bundled package out of. And we talked to the Verizon team about making this something that is cost affordable and that will build security into the network and into the phone itself. And so Verizon's given us some access to good pricing, really great product, and a good delivery for it, but we're not locked into Verizon. So if someone wants to use a different carrier or a different model or whatever, we have other options, and that's something to talk with Caden about as well. We don't yet have a work on your own phone solution yet, though. We're building that. So that's kind of the bring your own device. Can you add Guardian Phone to a current Verizon family plan? We can port from a family plan into our managed account, and we have done that, where families have said, hey, I've got 4 or 5 phones. We actually call this, though, the trade-in. You're trading in a smartphone for a safe phone. And we often have done that as an upgrade. So if you say, hey, kids, we're going to go to safe phones, they usually go, what are you doing? You're restricting me. Well, if you can do that with a new phone, we give new phones every 2 years, kind of like the old Verizon plan, new every 2. It's just a monthly payment. And then every 2 years, we refresh that. So you stay current and you stay safe on the same platform. How does Guardian Lock Phone differ from Bark? Great question. Is it customizable? And if a kid grows up and matures, you want to address that?
Yeah, so hugely customizable. We have a couple of different tiers just based off of pricing stuff that you can set it up. You can set it up differently that fits your family best. But different than Bark, we're completely unbypassable. You cannot get around Guardian Lock. So no matter where it is, whether it's cell-connected, Wi-Fi, unconnected completely, you can't delete an app, can't delete a profile. Unbypassable would be the biggest thing. We've worked a long time on that.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned before was that Bark is based on Android, which is a Google Android platform. Google is on the Dirty Dozen list because they haven't responded to a lot of the parent issues with controls. And when Caden was saying, let's go with Apple, it was because most of the time, these kids in, even elementary age are starting with an Apple product because they're going to end up with an Apple product in a lot of cases. So we wanted them to be able to grow up on a platform that starts restricted and allows only what you allow them to use and then expands. So we have 9 modes from child to teen to adult. And those modes allow you to set low, medium, high restriction levels and expand those with some specifics and granularity as they get older. So with added responsibility, you get added privilege, and that continues to grow in the platform. And that was the principle that we built into. All right, and I think there were a couple other questions. One more, does Guardian Lock only stop porn? What about sexting and FaceTime video naked? Does the phone stop recording or not allow the data to be shared? Yeah, so we actually use an Apple native control. This is an interesting thing. Apple built the technology to do nudity detection and blurring on phone or on a FaceTime, on texting, on messages, and on photos in the Photos app and through AirDrop. So we're implementing that control in a way that they just haven't opened up to other than the developer community. We're an Apple consultant and developer, and we have access to the tools that they built. They don't make it by default on, and that's what we asked them to do, is turn that on, block and screen FaceTime streamed phones. So yes, if you're on a FaceTime and the FaceTime shows nudity, the phone will blur it out. It'll stop the call and it'll notify the parent and say, hey, just so you know, that was an illicit content that was streamed. And again, we have options to turn the phone off, turn the camera off, turn FaceTime off, all within the same platform. They're Apple provided features that we just built the code to automate and to build controls to let the parent do it. So yes, those are capabilities that we can put into. And as it relates to sharing and privacy, so this is one thing that we've talked about, even with Secret Service recently. Caden had a discussion. We were in Austin, Texas at the Capitol a couple of months ago, and we were talking to state legislators, and Tim was doing a talk with the legislators about the solutions we're bringing forward. And someone said, hey, what about government use? What about privacy-centric phones? And actually what we found is the Apple platform is more privacy-centric than it is safety-centric. So we haven't turned off the privacy settings. In fact, we give more privacy. We don't put your information into the carrier plan. We actually have ours as a company that we represent, and all the privacy controls that you would have on an Apple product are even better because we don't get your data either. We don't gather it, we don't sell it, we don't monetize it, we don't want it. So anything that you do on the product and the platform as an adult or with your kids is your information, not ours. So that's one thing that we've been talking about with some other partners, is that the privacy-centric nature of phones should not be compromised for safety. We think we can strike the balance between having both. Anything else? So a couple of things that we did want to talk about key decision-wise here. You have the whose entitlements and who owns the device. These are decisions you need to make as parents. The what's, what access is acceptable? What is the notion of privacy in your home? And where and what areas of your life are screens not allowed? Have you answered that question? And then the last is, and how much? When is rest? We took this notion of no screen Sunday when our kids were little, and they just loved it because I would take their phones and we'd put them in the chargers, and they loved it.
They woke up to a sticky tab note that said, NSS, No Screen Sunday, is in effect. Love Dad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were really popular on Sunday.
Amazing being raised in our home, I'm sure, but there it was. And that was the No Screen Sunday sticker. And that was the cabinet where we would put the charging station that had the phones at night. And so on Sundays, we would say it's digital Sabbath time. And that might be for the whole day, or as they got older, it might be for times of day, where we would reserve that time for family time. And that sticker of No Screen Sunday was the analog mode of reminding them, analog being not digital, that sometimes the best memories that we develop are analog. They're not in digital ways. So how do we do that? We have to sometimes shut off the digital devices and allow there to be some free time to interact in the analog world that we live in. I think it's fun when kids are using Polaroids and digital cameras that are not a phone. You might give your kid a gift for their next birthday or Christmas that's like an old school phone or a camera that's not a phone, and allow them to use a camera for the camera's features. Those are fun things that we found too. All right, anything else that we missed here? So I talked about the triple threats: no bedrooms, no bathrooms, no boredom, establishing shared areas for charging in and checking in of devices to store them at night. Make sure that passcodes and access to all apps and devices are known by you, and you regularly test them to make sure they haven't been changed. Trust and verify, someone once said that was wise. Trust and verify is I trust that you're going to keep the passcode what you told me it was, and you put it in a note or something for you to keep. And I verify by every week, every other week, whatever you do, you have the habit of checking it. And then ownership entitlement definition. You need to establish that the device is not owned by a child. They're not an adult. They can't pay the cell plan. They didn't buy the phone. Some of these things are $1,500. So the device is not an entitlement for a child to feel like this is my device. And if you sense that, that's a warning sign for us as parents to go, we need to pull back a little and ensure there's no entitlement heart behind that.
Yeah, and the example, even with us as a married couple to our kids, we have open access to each other's phones. There's no entitlement. We don't keep phones from each other. Everybody has everybody's access code. So that takes away that entitlement. And I used to just tell the kids when they put their phone in the check-in station, these are not yours, you're checking them out, and we're getting on your phone. It's not a secret. You didn't, I caught you, Mom. No, I'm getting on your phone. You know that ahead of time because it is open to any of us.
And these are the Amazon products that I'd recommend would be like, just get the charging station because it's handy and it looks cool. And you can buy those charging stations and have them shipped to your house and say, hey, we got a new way of charging devices, and put them in the slot so you can check them in. And the Faraday bags on the right, these are interesting devices. If you stick their phone in one of these bags and you can pay $15 for one, it won't ring, it won't ding, it won't alert, it won't notify. It is meant to be a signal blocking device. These used to be only available to government, but now Faraday bags, meaning blocking all signal, can be yours for the low price of $16. Now we would take those and sometimes get a big bag and say, all right, throw the device in the bag, and that might be a way of having a dinner time without devices, is stick your device in the bag, or vacation. So those are some real practical things. But again, I mentioned the best experiences in life are almost always analog. And then measure progress. We talked about just verifying and checking in, but checking their screen time is important. If you don't have screen time established, you need to set that tool up. The other thing here is just in consequences, plan for failure. And we used to do this in cybersecurity. We expect things are going to break, and we expect kids are going to sin because they are our kids. But extend grace, point out the sin, explain our need for Christ, explain his sacrifice is enough. Restore them in relationship through that by confronting in love, and don't give condemnation. Condemnation has no place in that discussion when your kids fail. And encourage repentance, pointing them to Christ for repentance and restoration. It's a great opportunity when your kids fail to say, I get to point them to Christ. I get to show them what reconciliation and restoration looks like, but also not neglecting consequences, following through with and being consistent and fair with consequences for sin and for breaking the rules of your home. Those are some things we would say to stick with as parents so that you can ensure your kids will grow up again to be accountable and responsible. And the conversation again doesn't end, it's only a start. Checking in through relationship and reporting is important. Allow for honesty and openness, and do a contract if you want to go through that. We have those resources on the website again. If you didn't get your question answered, please scan and send it and we'll email you afterwards and would love to share more resources with you. Again, Caden's at the table. There's some more stuff. All of the stuff on Protect Young Hearts is free. What we do at Guardian Lock is really a parent-to-parent solution to try to help you guys in this age. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you guys. Thanks for having us.